right, I think we might be live now. I'm Ruby Rich. I'd like to welcome you all. I'm really happy to be here chatting with Camila Carter, who's joining us from Brazil.
Hello, Ruby. I'm so honored to meet you and to talk to you.
It's a great occasion. Your animated documentary, which is your remarkably, as you will all know when you see it, remarkably a first film, CARNE, or Flesh, has qualified for the Best Short Documentary category, but also it has already been shown in so many festivals, premiered at Locarno. It's also up for a Goya Award. It's been selected for, I don't know, more than 250 film festivals that it has played in. And you've won many, many awards, 65 awards. I don't know, too many to count. And it's just having a great run, a great success. And for any of you who have not seen it yet, I just want to mention that it's been selected as a New York Times Op Doc. And so you can see it on the New York Times Op Doc platform. But Camila, you got your degree in Brazil at Unicamp in media studies, and also did a year in Cambridge at the Anglia-Ruskin University. And I know you're planning to come to Europe if COVID allows for another program. But this film, for a first film, is so remarkably ambitious, especially for something so short. It's less than 12 minutes, has 5 sections, 5 different animators, and it is exploring the 5 different stages of a woman's life. And Carne, Flesh, is really a reference to women being seen as, you know, a side of beef. So as some kind of meat. So I'm curious to ask you, you came up with the idea of these 5 different sections. How did you choose these women? How did you come up with this plan?
When I had this idea of associating the meat cooking points with women's states of life, I imagined the film structured in 5 segments as if it was cut like meat. And I created some profiles for each stage. So for example, the first one is the rare phase about the childhood. The profile was very simple. It was a woman who was fat during childhood, telling a story about this period, something about fat phobia. And from these very simple profiles, we did a lot of research, and we also investigate some women online, and some of them we found through research, and some were some friends knew about the project, mainly women, and they referenced some women they knew that would fit the profiles.
Yes. Do we have a parrot or a toy here in the background? I hear this wild noise. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I guess, yes, it might be a parrot.
It's a parrot. Yeah, I just want people to know we are not doing sound effects for you. This is a touch of the tropics that's coming in with this. But
it's a Ben TV.
Yeah. But I think that it's so fascinating that you came up with this structure. Like for people who have not seen it yet, it's like the meat it starts out raw, it's rare, it's well done, medium well. And this corresponds to the different stages of women's lives. The first has to do with being a fat child. And then it comes with the moment when you get your period, with menstruation. And it goes through all of these different stages with radically different women. Women of different races, one trans woman, and you end just remarkably, and I want to comment on this, with someone that American audiences may not know, Elena Ignez, who is the final one, who is, 79 years old? Am I remembering that right? Yeah. And talks about finally achieving that age when you are beyond all of these other stages. Can you explain to people who Elena Ignez is? Because they need to know this. It's such an amazing way to end the film.
Elena Ignez is a very important actress here in Brazil. During the 60s and 70s, she was in so many films during the Cinema Novo and Cinema Marginal. And she was considered a muse of those cinemas, and now she directs her own films. And I remember when we were researching about Elena, and I saw her film, Copacabana Mon Amour, which we have a clip in Carnes, and she was talking about that she was very afraid of becoming old. And and I was struck by it, and I thought I need to use this clip on the film, and Elena was perfect for CARNE, because we were talking about the techniques of the film as well, and try to relate the techniques with the testimonies. And we used the 35 millimeters to animate and represent her story. And she actually was part of this analog film here in Brazil. And also Leila Monsegur, who animated the film strip, she refers to it as some kind of skin she was painting. Like
Painting skin. Like a tattoo artist, maybe.
Yeah.
But we have this painting also on that screen here, which is also very in keeping. And I see you have a poster of CARNE with that signature red behind you, too. And there is a way in which your film really gets at this sense of a woman's body being just not her own, and a way in which this is so much about different women reclaiming their bodies out of these kinds of traumas. How did you decide to match animators with these different women with such strong and different stories? Because you have all these different animation techniques. What came first, the animator or the woman's autobiography, really?
Yeah, actually, we had like two of the animators. They were in the very beginning of the project, even before we got the finance. And the other two, they came afterwards when we were already decided about the techniques. But I think it's important to say that in the early days of CARNE, in the very first beginning, CARNE was supposed to be made in 2D digital. But after interviewing the protagonists, I changed my mind. When I interviewed Raquel Patricio, the first one, she was telling her story, being a fat woman, a fat child, and living with her mother, who was a nutritionist. So I thought it was nice. Yeah, it was nice to have her story told with different material. For example, using a real plate as my blank canvas, and using food and objects. And I also came from a stop motion background, so the challenge was to do the same with the next stories, the next protagonists, to relate in some kind of sensorial way.
And there is a sensuality to it, and a use of different senses. Like in this first one, you have the plate being broken, and that's so shocking as a kind of symbol of like, stop eating, from her mother, who saw it as such an insult. And then the second one with the girl getting her period, which is also this kind of traumatic rite of passage. And she's like, the first thing you hear is her voice saying, "Caramba, why did it have to come so soon?" And it's really fascinating when you give these examples of, oh my God, that she goes to tell her mother, and then she discovers her mother has photographed her soiled, her bloodstained panties as, I don't know what, is this a memento? Is this very strange? I mean, how could you resist using this kind of paint in that one to represent that? It makes it so indelible, this kind of strategy. To that sort of trauma around it, what that means for young women. But you also bring in the social there. It's not just her, because you also bring in her going to school and the way in which this is talked about among girls. So you really show how these are all socialized processes, right?
Yeah, I guess that the pressure and all this this bad things that comes
Mm-hmm.
with patriarchy. They can be at home, they can be in school, everywhere, even your mother who loves you. So I think
Yeah.
it's important to show that. It was important to
Yeah.
show that in the film. Yeah.
And tell me about the woman in the next segment, who describes herself as a trans woman. She talks about being Black. Is this someone who is known in Brazil? Who is the person in that particular episode?
Raquel Virginia, she's very well known here in Brazil. She's a singer and composer of the band As Bahias, and she was someone that came up from research. I was already following her career online, and I'm a big fan of her. And I thought it was very important to have her stories and her experience as a transgender woman, Black woman. And actually, here in Brazil, we have a very bad statistic. Like, it's the country that most kills trans and homo and gay people. It's terrible. So I think it was important to have Raquel in the film,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a great fan of her.
Yeah, and she's terrific. Her voice is just terrific in the film, and the way in which you represent her is terrific. I want to stop for a second and just go back to this question of the research. You've said we a few times, and how did you get together a team to work on this film, to research it, and to make it? Was this a collaborative? Was it a group of women? I'm curious.
Yeah, CARNE was a very collaborative film. I think it was like an alliance between women. And when, for example, the idea started with a conversation with my sister, Bruna Katten, and afterwards we tried to finance the film. We got the money, and I had to find someone who would produce it. And I was very fond of Livia Perez's work, and I talked to her. She agreed to co-produce, and afterwards we had Cello Loureiro, who came along and joined our team. And Cello is from another generation as well, and all the team of animators, because every chapter was animated by different women, and it was very important to have this group, and it was wonderful. Yeah, it was the first time for me as well, and I love it.
Well, as you pass through the stages of the woman's life, it's not like Shakespeare's seven stages of man. The woman's life is very different, and you come to the stage of menopause, and it's very surprising what the woman that you interview has to say about this. Could you talk about that a little? Were you surprised by what she had to say?
Yeah, I was really surprised by Valkyria, and I wasn't expecting her story, but afterwards I heard that it's pretty common to have doctors who want to remove your uterus. So it was important to talk about it, because it's common, but it's silenced. People don't talk about it. And I like how Valkyria, she tells the story in a very light way. She's laughing, and I love to hear her laugh. And it was great to see the animation alongside her voice. It was animated by Cassandra Hayes with natural clay, and I think it fits pretty well, because her body is changing. It's menopause, but it's not so uncontrollable, I guess, as puberty. It's more dense, and she's mature, and I think the clay can reflect that.
I think it does. The claymation works very, very well. And yes, she's such a buoyant personality. And while there's this gravity to the fact that this doctor wants to remove her uterus, it's true that I know in the United States, my mother's generation, women in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they gave them hysterectomies all routinely. You would get your tonsils out as a child and the rest out as a woman, But what's remarkable here is that she talks about how fantastic menopause is and how she finds that it's really freed her from all of these other bodily stages. And I thought that was fascinating to hear, really fascinating. And then you use her to lead in. Of course, we come back to Elena Ignez, who is such an interesting choice to be this woman, at the end of this period, because not only was she a famous actress in Brazil, but she was heavily sexualized. And so for her to talk about what it means to come almost to the other side of her body is quite fascinating to me. Did you always know that you were going to have her talk about now in the present, at this stage of her life? Because the other women maybe are thinking back. So I'm curious at what point did you get her and know that she would be your ending?
Yeah, we interviewed 6 women, and we already knew that Elena would be the well done segment.
Well done, well done meat.
And I really like her speech. It's so poetic, and how she describes it, and how she relates and accepts her body at 79. And I usually get emotive in the last parts of the film.
we won't make you cry. But what's wonderful is you took this archival footage, that you found this section where she is going up to people she's a young woman, and she's going up to people on the street and says her dread of getting old, that she's terrified of she hates the idea of getting old. This is her young, predicting her future. And then in the future, as the old person, that's not how she feels. She feels that she has gotten rid of that young one. So it's such a surprising turnabout. And I really felt that the way that you used the old footage, it was almost like you were correcting the archive, to kind of align it with the way that we should feel about women's bodies. How did you find? You said that you found that footage, but was that one of these wonderful accidents of documentary, or how did you find that? How did you know about it?
Yeah, it was an accident because we already have chosen Elena. I was in love by her, and we already knew that we were going to interview. But when I was researching, I found that the film, it's a very famous film here in Brazil. It was directed by Rogério Sganzella, and it's called Copacabana Mon Amour. And I found online on YouTube this clip. It was fantastic.
I always say that documentary is such an improvisational medium. It's people talk about jazz, but really they also could talk about documentary. So that's a wonderful example of that. It's also, I think, really significant to have a film about women's bodies coming out of Brazil at this moment, when we have just had this amazing news out of Argentina of women organizing to finally win the right to legal abortion. What is going on in Latin America right now around women's bodies? It seems something much more progressive and advanced than we have in the United States, I have to say. Were you at all connected with the struggles in Argentina or aware of them? I don't know how much communication there is across the languages.
Yeah, I've been watching the news, and I'm so happy for the women in Argentina. But unfortunately, here in Brazil, we have Bolsonaro as president. So unfortunately, we are not in the same stage as they are now. But I hope, I hope it's something's changing, and I think it can get here in Brazil as well when we finish this Bolsonaro's government.
Well, it's wonderful to have a film with the power of yours come out during these Bolsonaro years, because I understand that he has cut off funding for film completely. Did you have to find funding from outside Brazil?
Yeah, we were when we were animating CARNE and doing the interviews, everything. In the middle of the production, we heard about it. We got the elections, and he was elected, Bolsonaro. And for a while, it was a very sad moment for us as animators, we get very upset. But afterwards, it was something that motivated us to move on and really speak about those things that now they are even more important. And during this process, we contact Chelo Loredo. Chelo Loredo, she's a Spanish producer, and she helped us to finish the film because we didn't have this the support anymore. So it was important to have this alliance between the women around the world.
Oh, that's beautiful. I want to ask you about your influences. I think that animated documentaries are relatively recent and such a rich new tradition. What have your influences been? Is there much of this kind of documentary in Brazil? Were you inspired by work from other places? What's been what should we know about the people or the work that have influenced you?
Yeah, I've been influenced by the work of Lizzie Hobbs and also Rosana Ubis, who is a Brazilian animator. But there's been a tradition here in Brazil with animated documentaries. This is something recent. And we have films like Guaxuma, which was shortlisted in the animated short subject last year. And also we had a short film called Tower about the dictatorship here in Brazil. Both were directed by women, Nara Normandi and Nadia Mangolini. And I think there's been a tradition. There's another film called Sangro, who is Brazilian. I think in English is I Bleed. Mm-hmm. They're been having a very good career in Brazil and also worldwide.
Well, I think that it particularly suits your subject here because there's a way in which any talk about women's bodies is immediately seen as being too heavy a subject, or it can be very prone to a certain predictable rhetoric. But the animation, without ever blunting your point, kind of lightens it. I think maybe it allows people to come inside the subject. How did you arrive at these styles? Were you worried about that? Were you trying to figure out how to engage people? I'm curious to know what kinds of ideas or conversations you had there at the beginning. It works beautifully, I think.
Oh, thank you, Ruby. Yeah, I guess that from the beginning, I was very worried because women would share very intimate and personal stories. And I thought that somehow animation would protect their images, their bodies, and also to help to tell the stories in this sensorially way that I was talking. And I think that animation has this potential. I think we can talk about hard topics and we without reproducing the violence, I guess.
At what point in all of this did you know that you were going to have this metaphor with the meat? Was that at the very beginning? Because in a way, that is both the funniest and the most shocking part of the entire animation is the title.
Yeah, it was the very beginning. The idea came from it. Yes, it was from a conversation with my sister. She's 6 years younger than me, and she's very engaged on feminism. And I guess that it came from there, from this conversation.
Ah, interesting. Interesting. I want to say I was asking you about the I'm going to interrupt myself. I was asking you about the bird before, but can you say the name of the Brazilian bird that was screeching in the background? What was the name for it?
It's here in Brazil. It's Bem TV.
That's TV. What I love. That it has TV in its name, as we are here on our internet TV. So it felt a right to interrupt, perhaps. And how has the film been received in Brazil? Obviously, around the world, audiences have loved it. What has the reaction been back home?
It's been great. I get the chance to go to some festivals before the pandemic here in Brazil, and I could see the audience reaction. It was very positive. People came to talk to me afterwards, and one nice thing is that we had a lot of audience awards in Brazil. Yeah. So I'm very happy with the response.
Yeah, that's very meaningful. And that's just, I mean, the wonderful thing about our new theaters in our screens is that we can go everywhere, but we can never see who's there. So we have much more mobility, but at the same time, we are sealed off. It's like, we go to festivals now and it's a festival in a box, we don't get out of it. So
Exactly.
we are taking the good with the bad. How is the lockdown for animation, though? Are you thinking about another piece? Are you thinking
Yes.
about the next work? Is there
Yeah.
anything you're able to share?
Of course, yes. I'm thinking about a next short film. It will be based on a true story, but not a documentary. It's also about my. It relates to my childhood. I studied in a Catholic school here in Brazil, and I was very afraid of Jesus Christ. And I want to make a musical comedy about this. It will be a short film in animation, and and also we are preparing a CARNE series, an anthology series with more themes related to bodies and women
Ah,
from
really?
around the
Oh,
world.
I want to hear more about that. So there will be more than 5 women then in that
Yeah,
case?
yeah, probably 20 women.
Ah,
And now we are planning to interview and have also artists from Brazil, Spain, Palestine, China, and Nigeria.
wow, wow. And are you working with a similar team of collaborators for that?
Yeah, yes, we are working with Carne's team and also Chilo Loredo, who produced the film, co-produced in Spain. Yeah, I'm
Uh-huh.
really excited. We're in the early development stage now.
Uh-huh. Well, I think I really love what you had to say about the way in which animation could protect the women from disclosure around these intimate stories. Um, and I think there's even something else that your animation has done, which is that there is such a tendency in society to link women's bodies to what we have to say. Oh, of course she says that because she's fat. Of course she says that because she is Black. Of course she says that because, and now it's a line drawing, it's a wash of color, it's a broken plate, it's some clay that is morphing. And so you've taken away the possibility to link the individual woman with her story. And I think by doing that, you've opened it up so that it really becomes all of our stories. And I really thank you for that. It's just been a delight to sort of see this and hear more about it from you.
Oh,
Really
thank you so
wonderful.
much, Ruby. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anything else? I think we have 10, 20 seconds left. I don't know. I look
Yeah.
forward to your next work, or maybe we will meet somewhere else in the world when any of us can travel again after COVID.
I hope so. I hope we can meet in person. And thank you so much for this conversation, Ruby. It was
Sure.
amazing.
My pleasure.